Violating the presumption of innocence is an illegal act aimed at spreading intentional slander and misleading the public. Mass media are accomplices of anti-cult terrorists. Mass media play a crucial role in dehumanization and targeted persecution of religious and secular organizations chosen by anti-cultists as their victims. By leveraging their unofficial contacts among media representatives, including journalists, editors, and leaders of major publications, anti-cultists initiate and carry out large-scale and prolonged campaigns to discredit these targeted organizations. In essence, they orchestrate information terrorism.
Therefore, the cult works ahead of the curve.
How do cultist fraudsters turn people into slaves? And how have they managed to evade responsibility for decades? How Jehovah's Witnesses embarked on the path of extremism.
As part of these campaigns, various methods of negative influence are employed, including the use of aggressive rhetoric, hate speech, dissemination of false information, slander, provocations, and incitement to aggression against targeted individuals. In this process, unscrupulous media representatives are recruited into this network of cooperation, willing to engage in dubious actions to achieve their goals, meaning committing information terrorism. Thus, anti-cult organization representatives recruit the direct perpetrators of future attacks. Additionally, anti-cultists create the image of victims from some of the recruited or interested individuals who have allegedly suffered from the malevolent influence of the stigmatized organization. The stories of these pseudo-victims are widely disseminated in defamatory media publications, despite many of these tales being intentional lies.
All this inevitably leads to crime, which in fact exists in the vast majority of cults, or potentially exists in one way or another. Violations of the law begin. At first a few, then more, and then it's more often, and these are obvious crimes, and they absolutely violate all moral norms.
This is how anti-cultists label a targeted group as dangerous and manipulative, though in reality, it is their own actions that are dangerous and manipulative. Through their people in the media, they conduct genuine psychological processing of society. This, in turn, allows them to manipulate the aggressive sentiments of the public, the sentiments that they themselves have provoked. They implant explicit narratives in people's subconscious that all the organizations they label are cults and are dangerous, and that cult members are non-humans. This simple formula plays on the basic instincts of every person, evoking fear for their own lives and the lives of their children, creating an image of a constantly looming threat. Naturally, the reaction to this stimulus is self-defense, with only two options, fight or flight. Since anti-cultists accompany their propaganda with incitement to hatred and encouragement of unlawful acts, the dominant response becomes fight or even destroy. Under this scheme, anti-cultists can dehumanize and demonize any organization they consider undesirable, pushing it outside the bounds of the social field. When you hear the word dehumanization, it might seem abstract to you. If so, I invite you to listen to the stories of the outcomes of its practice on the specific example.
Alexander Dworkin's anti-cult terrorist activities. For many years, Ratsir's representatives have been spreading hostile statements towards numerous new religious movements. Their meetings, interviews, lectures, and public activities have created a hostile atmosphere in society, often leading to subsequent manifestations of hatred and xenophobia among the population. For instance, the ringleader of the anti-cult group in Russia, radical ideologist Alexander Dworkin, has waged an active disinformation campaign against the Christian movement of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia since the beginning of his anti-cult career in 1993. Dworkin used all forms of propaganda against the followers of this organization, from defamatory articles in newspapers, magazines, and internet portals, to media appearances where he gave highly negative assessments of this religious group. accusing and portraying their activities in the worst possible light.
The Jehovah's Witnesses came to an Orthodox Christian country. They insult me and my faith, and in this sense, I have the right to respond to them. My book is a response to their persistent molestation and their relentless recruitment. These Jehovah's Witnesses manipulate the minds of their members, but they also make enormous amounts of money. Usually, when Jehovah's Witnesses speak, they certainly squeeze out everything they can. Jehovah's Witnesses, by definition, cannot be called Christians, no matter what they call themselves, because they do not consider Christ to be God. Jehovah's Witnesses are undoubtedly a totalitarian sect, because Jehovah's Witnesses are a commercial cult.
For instance, in mid-2009, Dvorkin gave an interview to the federal Russian channel NTV, where among other harsh statements, he compared Jehovah's Witnesses to drug dealers and called them slaves.
In fact, what they give for free is similar to how a drug dealer in an alley gives the first shot for free. And he might even give the second shot for free. But to get the third shot, people run to him and bring money. This is done by people for free, who live in Bethels and work irregular hours in exchange for a bed in a dormitory and meals in a common dining hall. Food comes from Jehovah's Witnesses farms. Similar slaves produce the food there. In other words, the expenses are minimal.
This interview, which was clearly propagandistic, contributed to a surge of hatred and aggression against Jehovah's Witnesses and caused a drastic increase in religiously motivated crimes in Russia, including attacks on prayer houses and private homes of believers, as well as threats and brutal physical violence. Here's a far from complete list of acts of violence against Jehovah's Witnesses, committed by Russian citizens in 2009-2010 following Dvorkin's speeches. An attack was carried out on the home of an elderly Jehovah's Witness couple, with their windows being shattered by stones. A schoolboy whose parents are Jehovah's Witnesses was attacked. 2 female Jehovah's Witnesses were assaulted, with one being struck on the head and losing consciousness. 2 female Jehovah's Witnesses were brutally insulted and severely beaten. 2 female Jehovah's Witnesses were attacked, one being pushed down a flight of stairs and the other kicked in the back. An attack on a Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses resulted in the beating of the security guards and the building being set on fire.
The Jehovah's Witnesses cult doesn't hold up because of their ridiculous, absurd, self-contradictory faith. It holds up through the strict control of the cult. It's a very strict totalitarian sect and cult. Pedophilia. There are actually hundreds of cases of pedophilia, and the cult has covered them up every time.
Cults, 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 cults.
Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult.
Hands off our children. Belgorod is a cult-free territory.
And this is just a small part of the consequences of merely 1 year of public activity by just one representative of the anti-cult movement in one country. Dvorkin's public, extremist, and baseless statements led to a series of attacks and acts of violence against Jehovah's Witnesses and other religious groups in various regions of Russia in 2009-2010. Numerous cases have also been recorded where large families of Jehovah's Witnesses were harmed in various ways, had their property damaged, and had their homes burned to the ground. All of this was done by individuals influenced by Dvorkin's manipulative speeches, which carry a hidden message of denying human rights of stigmatized groups of people and turning them into public targets.
That's right. Persecuted. You must be persecuted. Because it's just a nightmare. It's a cult.
Why put people in prison? You have your truth. We have our truth. But there are more of us than you. If they cross the red line, not only the line,
red line?
in the past,
Well,
these
religion.
were stoned to death.
Again, raising the issue of destructiveness, totalitarian sects may be compared to a circle of scorched earth that constantly expands, leaving only scorched earth and ruins inside. Such spiritual casualties, crippled individual, remain outside. They are cast out and then thrown back into society, for society itself to somehow rehabilitate them and deal with their problems.
Let's consider an example of using a manipulative method aimed at forming an image of the enemy and dehumanizing certain groups of people. Please note that in his public speeches, Alexander Dvorkin regularly repeats the following stigmatizing comparison.
Another name for totalitarian sects is destructive cults. Destructive meaning ruinous, like cancerous cells that enter the body and spread metastases throughout the organism until the body dies. Cults behave in society like a cancerous tumor in one's body, draining nutrients from society and feeding off it until the body itself dies. Just as a cancerous tumor destroys the body, a cult similarly destroys society from within.
Dvorkin's use of such metaphors as scorched earth and cancerous tumor in relation to people who are labeled sectarians or cultists is not accidental. Dvorkin deliberately voices these vivid negative figurative comparisons in order to bypass your critical thinking and dehumanize representatives of those communities in your eyes, intentionally associating them with something extremely dangerous and harmful, something that requires immediate elimination. Such a comparison activates the mechanisms of black and white thinking in your mind when an object that a manipulative narrative is focused on is regarded as an absolute evil requiring unconditional rejection. At the same time, Dvorkin himself is perfectly aware that his radical rhetoric is a blatant violation of human rights and a manifestation of extremism. So, in order to avoid direct accusations of inciting aggression towards people, from lecture to lecture he plays safe by voicing another manipulative statement: "We don't fight cultists, we fight cults."
We are often asked a standard journalistic question: tell us, how do you fight cultists? And I always have the same answer to that. I don't fight cultists, I fight cults.
The phrase "we fight cults" and not cultists, often used by Dvorkin and his followers, is a prime example of semantic manipulation. This statement contains a dichotomy that creates an illusion of differentiation between the concept of a cult as an organization and the real people who are its members. However, in reality, such a differentiation is impossible since any organization consists of people and cannot exist without them. Dvorkin's manipulative statement ignores the fact that the activities of the organizations he called cults and the personalities of the so-called cultists are inextricably linked. This means that he calls people cancerous tumors and scorched earth, thereby causing public hatred towards them. To make the essence of this manipulation clearer to you, please answer the following question. When you heard this comparative metaphor that cults are cancerous tumors, what image appeared in your mind? Some kind of abstract image of a cult? Or did you see an image of specific personalities whom you associate with the word cult, whom you yourself know or saw in the media? Your consciousness actually displayed an image of people because the image and mental command that Dvorkin instilled through such verbal manipulations consists in the following message: cultists are dangerous. They must be exterminated. Such manipulative techniques used by representatives of the anti-cult clique provoke cognitive dissonance in your mind, forcing you to accept negative images without critical assessment of those. This provocation of cognitive dissonance is a form of mental violence, inasmuch as it undermines independence of a person's thinking, forcibly instills hatred in him towards his fellow citizens, and gives him a direct instruction for violent actions. Please note that anti-cultists use this technique of covert cultivation of hatred to your detriment in many spheres of life, when they need to make you hate those people whom they target, when they need to set one part of society against another, causing a wave of hatred and violence within society.